Hey, how are you doing today? We've got a fun drawing today. It's a French horn. We're going to use negative shapes and learn about the reflectiveness of brass type metal, and it'll be a fun lesson. Stick with me. All right. We're going to be drawing brass instruments today. We're going to go straight for one of the most beautiful and slightly complicated brass instruments, which is a French horn. Now, if you'd like to follow along but do a different brass instrument, you're totally welcome to do that. The two things that I'm looking for are to see that you can learn how to use negative space to make a drawing, and also that you can understand reflective brass type objects and display the kind of colors that you get with brass. So let's talk about both of those subjects for a second before we get started. Negative space is the space in between objects. So if I arrange a couple of markers here on this piece of paper, you can see in between the markers, if they don't roll away, a big triangle. That is negative space. Objects like a French horn or a trumpet have a lot of pipes going this way and that way, and so they create a lot of negative shapes. And if you can look at those negative shapes and draw them, you're on a much better foot into getting a correct, well done drawing. So next, the way light reflects off of brass. We want to look at how light and dark the brass can go, how the highlights are arranged, and what sort of colors are displayed. Brass is such an interesting material, and gold is the same way. It has a yellow tint to it, but it also reflects some of the colors around it. So if this marker was made of brass and this paper were red, you would see a red line along the bottom of the marker because it would reflect that red light that's coming into it. At the same time, most of it would be a yellowish color, and the darker parts might even be slightly green. And then the highlights, where the light's shining off of it, would be very bright white because it's a very shiny material. So that's a thing or two about how light reflects off of brass, gold type objects. All right, so let's get started. One of the first things we want to do is to make the overall form of our instrument, and in the case of a French horn, that's going to be a big circle. I'm going to start drawing very lightly because I might need to erase some things, and if I draw too dark, I'm not going to be able to do that. Simple as that. Okay, now that we've got that, let's start with some of the main forms. So one of the main forms is the fluted area where the sound comes out. That's going to come off in this direction. Let's draw the top and bottom before we start making the rim of the object. This might be a little bit too close to that top area. Let's move that line down just a little bit. All right, so we've got two lines coming out from the initial circle that we drew, and we're going to draw an ellipse on top of that. All right, now let's zero in exactly where this line should be. It got a little bit hairy. And we'll just remark it quickly so that we can get it right where it needs to be. All right, that looks good. Let's keep moving on. So there are a lot of pipes. If you have Googled a picture of a French horn by now, or clicked the link in the description to see one, you know that there's a lot going on. So we want to try to simplify things to start out so that we don't have to do too many complicated shapes just to get it to look like a proper French horn. All right, I've added the mouthpiece there coming off in that direction. Now I'm going to do the major curves that I see as I squint at a picture of a French horn. One comes out from just above the center and curves up like this, breaks through that initial circle that we drew, and then comes straight down right there. So I'm going to draw that form. And then there's one of these more or less in every corner of the overall shape. So we've got another curve that comes down over top of this area and curves back up right around the center of the circle. All right, now it also curves down right here to form a sort of S shape right here. So we've got that shape, we've got this S shape. Next we have we've got two little humps that sort of look like, what do these things look like? They're the shape of a baguette. They're just like, maybe that's why this is a French horn. Long sort of finger type shapes right here. Okay, next we've got another curve down in this corner, but it stays generally inside the circle and just curves down right here. Good, so we've got 4 major curves going on. Now, in between these two shapes and this shape, there's another big curve that's a major part of the French horn. And it goes from here over to here, just like that. Okay, now's a good time to do a quick check and make sure that your lines are straight. For example, I see that these lines that are supposed to be parallel to the edge of the paper are leaning a little bit. So I'm going to fix those. And in general, take a step back from your drawing, look at it in the mirror, squint at it, and see if anything is really off before we move on. All right, I think I'm ready to move on here. The next big shape that we've got is a big rectangle that goes right in the middle here, and it starts right below this shape that we drew earlier. And we'll start it from right about here, go down to about here, and we want to make sure that this line is nice and straight. This line is going to be mostly hidden by some circles that will go on top of it, but nevertheless I want to make sure that it's straight because it's a guiding line for one of the biggest shapes in the whole thing that we're drawing here. Alright, next we're going to come over from here all the way to where these two lines meet. Good. And on the bottom, we're going to do the same thing right below it. So we want to go from here over to about here. Okay, good. So let's come down the right side of this partial rectangle that we just drew and add some circles. So there's 3 circles on the inside of this rectangle and one that's above it. Let's add the 3 on the inside first. Make them nice and big, not touching each other, but covering most of the area of this side of the rectangle. I think I'd like this first one to be just a little bit bigger so that it matches. And I would like this middle one to be a little bit more round instead of potato shaped. There we go. All right. Next, we've got a lot of shapes in here where these pipes sort of snake back and forth and loop around. So we're going to get into that. Now, don't be too distressed if one of your pipes in this horn doesn't quite connect with another. It's not all about the details, it's just about observing the general shapes and the negative spaces. That's what I want you to learn. So we're going to create a pipe that comes right across this top and then curves up with this curve that you drew earlier and curves back down with it just the same, and we're going to lead into the circle again with this side. Now this side of the pipe actually needs to follow with it, so I'm going to erase just a little bit that I drew earlier and bring it along all the way back to the space between the first and second circle. Okay. Just trying to erase places where it got off track and it's not quite straight. All right, there we go. Next, we have two pipes that come out from this circle and create pretty much an elongated oval shape that's sideways. So we're going to go to about here, curve back down, and close that oval, and then put another little oval inside of it to show the difference between the top of the pipe and the place where it curves back along the bottom. There we go. Now it's not quite even. This top of the pipe looks a lot thinner than the bottom, so I might move this down just a tad. All right, close enough. Next, we're going to create a pipe that comes out from the bottom of this circle and connects with this area right here. So it comes straight across and then connects with what we drew earlier right there. And we're going to create another pipe that comes in, let's see. Let's use the bottom of the rectangle here to create this pipe and then follow it downwards as it goes around this way. Just following that line that I drew earlier to create a pipe. And I think what we need to do is actually bring all of this up just a little bit. So we're actually going to take this bottom of the rectangle and move it upwards just a little bit so that it can come in to the top of this circle. So we've got two lines coming out from this bottom circle that connect down to here. Good. So correct shape, but it's a little thin here. Okay, next we're going to just straighten everything out and then we'll move on to the next thing. Good, so we've got most of the horn drawn. The rest is some simple things that go behind and create more shapes. So what I'd like you to look out for are negative shapes. For example, there's one here that's shaped like a banana, and then there's another here that's shaped like a triangle, and then there's another down here that is this sort of unnamed shape. Now, if you can draw these shapes, you can see where the pipes are going behind. So you see that there's one coming down here and then snaking back up that way. There's one coming in this way and headed back through here. There is another shape right here that is a sort of partial circle that just connects these areas. And then from here you can just trace parallel to that circle to create that shape. Now, that initial circle that we drew at the very beginning, we're going to add some thickness to that so that you can see that this is also part of the French horn. So I'm going to go around the outside of it, trying to stay the same distance from that circle the whole way. Go all the way around. Skip over this area where the trumpet's coming out. And skip over any areas that have shapes that go outside the circle, because those shapes are in front of this shape that we're currently drawing. There we go. All right. Next, let's give some thickness to these pipes. That'll be done with another shape that's just parallel to the edges that we drew at the beginning. All right. Now, there's a couple of shapes in between these pipes that look really cool, because this pipe comes down underneath of all the ones that we've drawn earlier, and so do a couple other pipes. You just have to remember which part of this is behind the pipe and which part is the pipe. I just drew on top of the pipe, so I erased it. All right, there we go. Next, we've got a part that comes over from, we never did draw that last circle up here on top. It comes from this circle across and down. And this is going to be a pipe that goes underneath all of this as well to create more little rectangular negative shapes. There we go. Okay. Next, we can add little circles on top of these little circles, just to show the form. And we're going to add a little area right over here where there are keys to change the notes. So that is a sort of rectangle that comes out in this direction. And it has a couple of shapes that go like this, and other shapes that are sort of a deflated balloon shape, or the shape of a piano pedal, whatever you want to call this. It's this shape. All right, there we go. Next, we have another pipe that passes underneath this one through this area. we'll just take it down to here. All right. I think we are getting ready to color this. There may be some pipes here and there, like this one, that need to be closed off, but we're not going to be able to draw every single pipe going in every direction and have it all meet up because there's just so much going on with this instrument. We've drawn enough to get the general picture of what it looks like. All right, so before we start coloring, I'm just going to follow these pipes along and see if there's any places where a pipe that's on top crosses over pipes that are underneath, and erase those lines underneath so that it's clear for me to see, okay, this one goes over top and I need to color it this way, not that way. Because the shadows and highlights tend to run along the pipes, so you'll be able to tell which one is on top even more clearly once there's color involved here. Okay, I think that looks good enough. So let's connect this set of keys real quick to this area of the drawing with just a couple of lines. And we're going to start coloring. So the main note of all the color is going to be yellow or sort of light orange. I'm going to start with yellow because we can always take it darker down to an orange, but if you're using marker or colored pencil or some form of color that's not erasable or coverable like paint, you're going to want to start with a light color and then graduate down to the darker colors afterwards. All right, so the top surface is going to receive a good deal of yellow, maybe even all the way to the middle of each pipe, because we want to make sure to leave plenty of room covered in yellow so that we can go back and shade it down if we need to. This will be good filler otherwise. You can see how I'm going for getting the top half of each pipe colored in yellow to lighten up that top half as if the light is coming down from above, and then I'm going to use darker colors on the bottom parts. One of the downsides of this, if you ended up drawing darkly in a couple of places by mistake, as I did, that pencil graphite gets mixed in with some of the yellow and turns it an off color. But there's not too much we can do about that now. I'm just going to roll with it. All right, there we go. Now we're gonna move into let's see, what should we move into? I think I'm gonna start by creating a peachy color in the shadows, and this is gonna get darkened down, but maybe left in some parts to show reflected light. Reflected light is light that's coming down from above, bouncing off the table and back into the parts that are blocked from the light. Those parts are going to be a little bit warmer in color because, not to get too science-y on you, but reflected light loses energy, and lost energy makes light a little bit warmer. All right, now we've got the boring block in done, and we can start putting more detail into the color. All I've used so far if you skipped ahead, which is fine, is yellow and this peach color. So yellow on the top of each shape and peach color on the bottom. Let me just fill this in with a little bit more peach, and then we'll get started with the darker colors. So I think I'm going to go with this copper just to get a nice warm color to the shadows. We'll use brown as well, but I want to start laying in some darker shapes with this first. So we're just following along parallel to the edge that we drew earlier. When I say parallel, I don't mean, perfectly parallel like you have in geometry, but just following the curve or the flow of the line. I wish there was a good word for that. I would be using that word quite a bit. There we go. Now, we want to focus on places where the pipe is traveling upwards, because that will receive less light than a pipe that is traveling side to side. And also the undersides of all the pipes that are traveling side to side. But places where it curves, especially, it will catch the light a little bit better, so we'll leave the dark colors out of areas like this one and this one, but we'll stick it in there for other places like this, especially where there's a big tangle of pipes and you have pipes coming behind. Those are going to need a lot of dark color to get the effect that those things are behind. I just filled in a shape here that I hadn't drawn before because I noticed that this pipe coming up did not have a place to follow through up to there. All right, now, believe it or not, I want to get a cool color in here. So if you have some sort of gray, oftentimes brass colors don't just reflect warm in the shadows, but they turn a little bit cooler. It really just all depends on what they are reflecting. But I want to make sure that I get that and it looks like a real brass color, because brass colors really will have some cooler shadows as well. So we don't have to, you know, fill this in every single instance, but there are a lot of places where it will actually fit. Sounds like my 2-year-old daughter is not having fun right now. There we go. All right, for the last step, I'm just going to take some brown and fill in some areas that really need to stand out, like this area on the end. I'm going to fill that in with brown, maybe come along the very bottom edge of this part, just to get it to pop. All right. Fill some of this in, and we'll get some of the darker areas that are, again, sort of behind the front parts of the drawing, and darken those down just a little bit more to add some depth to this. All right, I think we're just going to add a little touch on the rim here, and we will call this drawing done. Hope you guys found this helpful, and I can't wait to see what instruments you come up with and how you get into coloring them and observing the negative shapes. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks. Bye.